Hello, I'm Paisley, and I'm here to share my story about how I endured life in an orphanage. Before we dive into it, please take a moment to like this video and hit that subscribe button. If you do, they say the fairy godmother will bless your life with love and wealth. Now, let's get into my tale. I've spent as long as I can remember in the orphanage. My mother is behind bars, and my father tragically lost his life in a car accident. Life within those walls was ordinary, but admittedly quite dull. Every child shared a common dream to be adopted by a loving family. However, when I turned 10, things took a dark turn with the arrival of a new manager, Mr. Bryant. We could sense trouble just by looking at him. On his very first day, he summoned all the children to the dining room and made his initial announcement with a stern demeanor. From this day forward, all the rules shall change. Those who dare defy them will find themselves in the isolation room, he declared. Gasps of fear rippled through the room, but I couldn't take his words seriously. Turning to my friend Anna, I whispered, "He must be joking, right?" But before she could reply, Mr. Bryant thundered, "Who said that?" A heavy silence descended upon the room. No one spoke, but when he threatened one of the girls, she pointed directly at me. He ordered me to step forward and stand on a chair. Then, summoning one of the teachers, he demanded a pair of scissors. To my utter dismay, he proceeded to cut my long, beautiful blonde hair while uttering, "This is your punishment for interrupting me. No one is permitted to speak when you are present." Tears streamed down my face and all the children were gripped by terror. From that day onwards, life in the orphanage transformed into a nightmare. We felt like prisoners, forced to toil for everything we had. Our only respite was during bedtime. Yet, amidst this bleak existence, there was one bright spot. My crush, Julian. Julian was undeniably handsome and charming, but our interactions were strictly forbidden due to Mr. Bryant's rule against mingling between boys and girls. However, fate had other plans one day when I opened my locker to retrieve some clothes. To my shock, Julian was hiding inside, gesturing me to remain silent with a finger to his lips. Unable to contain my curiosity, I whispered, "What are you doing here?" He responded, "I accidentally broke one of the windows outside, and I figured the girls' locker room would be the safest place to hide." We barely had time to exchange words when we heard approaching footsteps. Without hesitation, Julian seized my hand and drew me inside the locker. It was a cramped space, and we found ourselves standing face to face. My cheeks flushed and my heart raced wildly, but Julian seemed unfazed. He listened attentively, and our eyes locked, causing us both to blush. He murmured, "I think we can escape," to which I earnestly replied, "Yes, I'd love to go out with you." But he chuckled and clarified, "No, I mean get out of the locker." I was serious about my feelings for him, though. After emerging from our hiding spot, Julian made his way out of the window. From that moment, we began secretly dating. We exchanged clandestine letters and rendezvous vows in the locker room, away from prying eyes. However, our secret romance eventually unraveled when a counselor noticed the way we gazed at each other and, on one unfortunate occasion, caught us hugging. She swung open the locker door, revealing our clandestine meeting. "Oh, I see what's going on here," she remarked with displeasure and ushered us to the office. Sitting there awaiting our punishment, we both felt a profound sense of guilt. After a lengthy scolding that seemed to stretch on for ages, she finally released us. As we stepped out, Julian wore a resolute expression. Turning to me, he declared, "We must escape this dreadful place." I raised objections, citing our youth and the difficulties of survival. Nonetheless, he remained steadfast in his determination. "We can do this. I'm leaving tonight, and you have to come with me," Julian said firmly, leaving me feeling somewhat bewildered. I spent the entire night pondering his proposal and concluded that life at the orphanage would be dreary without him. So at midnight, I gathered my cherished belongings and met him in the courtyard, successfully avoiding the watchful eyes of the security cameras. We fled the premises, uncertain of our destination. We walked through the night until morning, and over breakfast, Julian suggested we seek employment. Armed with a mere $100 he had managed to pilfer from one of the counselor's purses, we agreed to reconvene later and apply for jobs. Sadly, our youthful appearances made it difficult to secure employment, and nobody was willing to hire us. That night, we managed to secure a room in a motel. "Oh my God, the stench in this room is unbearable," I exclaimed with disgust. Julian replied, "Well, it beats sleeping on the streets. You'll get used to it." A week passed as we tirelessly searched for work. Julian managed to deceive employers about his age and secured a job at a fast food restaurant, but my luck wasn't as favorable. At the end of that week, Julian approached me with a solemn expression. "Hey, Paisley, we need to split up. I can't support both of us any longer," he said. I gazed at him, seeing the seriousness in his eyes, and my anger flared. "You convinced me to run away with you, and now you want to give up so easily?" "What a fool," I retorted, grabbing my belongings and leaving in frustration. Returning to the orphanage was not an option, as Mr. Bryant's punishment awaited me, and I had no other place to go. I sat on a street corner, hoping for some form of assistance, but 2 days passed without any sign of help. I was tired and covered in grime, surviving on the scraps left on restaurant tables. Exhaustion had taken hold of me. Then, late one night, a kind-hearted young woman approached and asked, "What are you doing here, young lady?" I broke down in tears. She was the first person to speak to me in 2 days. I choked out, "I have no one. I'm homeless." She expressed sympathy, but then offered, "I'm Nicholas. I live alone, and I'd appreciate some company. Would you like to come live with me?" I couldn't resist her offer, desperate for assistance. I immediately accepted. She led me to her home, where she provided me with food, and I devoured it like a starving soul. Afterward, she showed me to my room, and I slept like a baby. However, the following morning during breakfast, she stated, "You can't just stay here for free. You'll have to work for your keep." I looked at her surprised, but she continued, "Don't worry, it's a cleaning business. I clean wealthy people's houses and earn money. I'll pay you, of course." The proposition sounded appealing, and I thought, I'll work and earn some money. It doesn't seem so bad. But it wasn't as it seemed. On our first day cleaning, we arrived at a magnificent mansion. The owner handed Nicholas the keys and then departed for a game of golf. Nicholas fetched some cleaning tools and instructed me to sweep the floor while she inspected the rooms. I knew what she was doing was wrong, but I felt powerless to stop her. I continued cleaning in silence. At the end of the day, the owner returned and handed Nicholas $1,000. On our way home, Nicholas took $200 from the earnings and handed it to me, saying, "You've earned it." I stared at the money with a mixture of resentment and disgust. Nicholas had left me to clean all by myself, and I felt entitled to half of that $1,000. However, I was too worn out to voice my grievances, so I kept my mouth shut. This pattern repeated itself, with me toiling away while Nicholas collected payment for both of us. I also noticed she was secretly stashing items in her bag. While she was engrossed in examining the painting on the wall, I couldn't resist the temptation and discreetly peeked inside her bag, revealing a diamond ring. I gasped and hastily closed the bag as if nothing happened. That night, I made a pivotal decision to follow her path and delve into stealing. If I aimed for a better life, I needed to start making money. If Nicholas could do it, then so could I. I began taking small items from the houses, tiny trinkets, wooden antiques, and valuable gold pens. However, I didn't keep these items for myself. Instead, I sold them to antique shops, stashing away the money in a private place, all the while maintaining a facade of gratitude towards Nicholas to avoid arousing suspicion. This clandestine practice continued for 2 years until one fateful night when we heard an insistent knocking at our door. Nicholas answered, only to find the police standing there. She was promptly arrested, caught on camera stealing jewelry from the house we had recently visited. Once the police left, I couldn't remain idle. I swiftly packed my belongings and retrieved my hidden stash of money. It was time for me to move on. I rented a modest apartment and resumed working as a head cleaner. My reputation for excellence in cleaning allowed me to acquire more clients. Among them was Gavin, a man in his 20s who exuded undeniable charisma. I couldn't help but steal glances whenever he was present in the house. However, a significant obstacle stood in our way. Gavin was married, and I found myself watching him from the shadows for weeks. At first, he seemed unperturbed by my discreet admiration. But one afternoon, as I was engrossed in cleaning the kitchen, he approached and uttered, "I know how you feel. I feel the same way." My cheeks flushed, and I gazed at him, responding with intrigue, "Oh, really?" His response remained shrouded in silence. He approached me, planting an unexpected kiss on my lips. Gavin and I had begun a clandestine relationship, which emboldened me to commit a daring act, stealing from his luxurious home. I rationalized my actions by thinking that he relished my presence and his house harbored rare, valuable antiques. So I pilfered some items and discreetly sold them for profit. It didn't take long for Gavin, who was wealthy but far from gullible, to discover my transgressions. He erupted in anger, exclaiming, "How dare you steal these things? We pay you well." Panic surged through me, and in desperation, I concocted a fabricated claim. "You know," I said with a shaky voice, "I'm pregnant with your child." His face drained of color, and he wholeheartedly believed me, setting the stage for my second move. "If you want me out of your life," I continued, "you'll need to pay me $2 million. Fear gripped Gavin, who clearly wished to safeguard his relationship with his wife. Reluctantly, he agreed. "Okay, fine. But you're no longer employed here. You're fired." I retorted, "I don't care about working for you. I need the money. I'll send you my bank account details." Gavin began sending me money monthly, believing my false pregnancy tale. To maintain the illusion, I fabricated pregnancy photos and sent them to him. His messages echoed his desire to sever ties with both me and the imaginary baby. When the time came for my fictitious birth, I persuaded my neighbor to entrust me with her newborn for a few hours, citing her need to run errands. Armed with the borrowed infant, I made my way to Gavin's workplace. Upon spotting me, he grew visibly nervous and insisted we meet in a secluded area of the parking lot, away from prying eyes. Gavin inquired, "What are you doing here? I've already given you everything you asked for." In response, I asserted with confidence, "The baby and I need a proper home. I can't continue living in that old, dusty apartment." Gavin's face flushed with anger, yet this time he made a different offer. "I'll arrange a house for you," he declared, "but you'll need to sign documents absolving me of any further responsibilities. I'll also secure a restraining order to ensure you stay away from me and my property." I responded with a sly smile, "Sounds fair." So, Gavin purchased a house for me in one of the finest neighborhoods just outside the city. I couldn't have been happier. I now had a home and a lifetime of savings. It felt like a dream come true. However, 3 years later, while I was shopping for groceries, a familiar voice called out, "Oh my God, Paisley, is that you?" I turned around to see Julian, who had grown taller, larger, and undeniably attractive. All my emotions for him came rushing back. I forgot about the past and rushed to embrace him, exclaiming excitedly, "Julian, I've missed you so much." Julian seemed impressed by my appearance, and I could sense that he had fallen for me. We began to chat, and I invited him to my new house, eager to catch up on his life. However, it soon became evident that Julian had not fared as well as I had. He was still struggling financially, barely making ends meet. I reassured him, saying, "Don't worry, Julian, you can stay here with me in this house. We can live together." Julian was overjoyed and expressed his gratitude. Curious about my journey, he inquired, "So, how did you end up like this?" I proceeded to recount the entire story, and Julian beamed with pride. As we started living together, it didn't take long for him to propose marriage. I couldn't bring myself to refuse. My love for Julian was unwavering. Our wedding took place in an intimate ceremony, and I was overjoyed. However, my happiness was later overshadowed by concerns when it became apparent that I couldn't conceive. Despite our earnest efforts, the doctor delivered a devastating blow when he said, "I'm sorry, but it appears you can't have children." It felt like my world was collapsing around me. I had always longed for children, yearning to cradle my own baby in my arms. When we returned home, Julian seemed different, prompting me to ask, "What's troubling you?" He replied, "Perhaps our inability to have children is a consequence of your past actions. Could it be a form of punishment?" I could feel my anger surging. Was he now passing judgment on me? In frustration, I retreated to my room. His words kept echoing in my mind throughout the night, and by morning, I had made up my mind. I conveyed my decision to Julian at breakfast, saying, "I believe you may be right. I've committed some terrible deeds, and I feel compelled to make amends. I'm going to donate half of my wealth to an orphanage. They truly need it." Julian smiled warmly and assured me, "I'll make sure the donation reaches them." I wrote a check and handed it to him. I chose not to accompany him to the orphanage. The thought of it brought back painful memories. Instead, I decided to wait for Julian at home. Hours turned into days as I waited anxiously. However, Julian never returned. I made several unsuccessful attempts to reach him by phone, but his device remained out of range. Where on earth had he vanished to? I waited for 2 more agonizing days, but Julian never came back. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Julian had stolen the check and vanished without a trace. I couldn't help but feel foolish, though I knew I wasn't. While rummaging through his belongings in a desperate search for any clue about his whereabouts, I stumbled upon 2 packages of pregnancy pills. It dawned on me that he had given them to me to prevent me from getting pregnant. That explained his unwavering determination to ensure I drank a glass of water every night before bed. Despair washed over me, and time passed relentlessly. Now, 15 years later, I find myself at the age of 38, having lost everything due to a crippling gambling addiction. My life has spiraled to a point where I feel utterly pathetic, convinced that no one would ever want to marry me. I've begun contemplating a radical change in my life, considering the possibility of becoming a nun and devoting myself to helping orphan children. Alternatively, a darker idea has crossed my mind, perhaps resorting to theft from Mr. Bryant, in a desperate attempt to secure financial stability. Who knows what that devious mind will conjure up next?